Morning, everyone, and welcome to the People Overview Committee. Please note that this meeting has been live streamed and recorded. Please also note that all remote participants are muted at the outset of the meeting and are only able to speak at the invitation of the chair. Please raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, and then only unmute when the chair invites you to make your contribution. As chair, I may ask that you're muted if you do not participate in this way. Apologies for absence. We have Councillor Duncan Kerr and Julian Dean to substitute, Councillor Kevin Pardy and Councillor Caroline Bagnall to substitute, and Sean Lyons. Do we have any disclosable pecuniary interest? Bruce?
Thank you, Chair. A grant fund with Fend attending Sevendale, and trustee of a charity that provides learning disability supported living.
Minutes of the meeting held on the 24th January. Everybody happy? Would we like to pose them? Seconded. All in favour? Thank you. Do we have any public questions? No. We don't have any member questions. So I'll go straight on to number 6 and hand it over.
Morning all. Morning all. So for those of you who don't know me, but I'm sure many of you do now, I'm Karen Tyler, Assistant Director for Joint Commissioning. So I'm just going to start off with the report. So today we haven't presented any slides in addition to the reports to allow time really for questions and for us to go through a bit more discussion point. I know you love slides, so we try to refrain away from them on this occasion. We'll see how it goes. So we're presenting the report today as an update to the Scrutiny Committee on the areas of demand and activity across the People's Directorate. So the report captures the areas of focus really for both people and for both adults and children and young people, as well as where the demand is coming through and the activity that we're doing around that. But I just thought it might be useful just to give you a bit of an overview, I think, in terms of where we are with some of the performance and the wider work that we're doing around the performance dashboards, which I know has been discussed many times at previous committees. We have now got a suite of performance indicator dashboards, BI business intelligence dashboards, that are captured now centrally under an adult section and for children and young people. That's probably for the first time that we've had that. We've been trying to work at pace with that with the performance team, as many of you will be aware, and many of you have also been and supported us in terms of that development. So we've got multiple areas of focus of that. So for adults, for example, we'll have the national ASCOF indicators, which we'll describe a bit within the report. We've got things like the carers, we've got things like the technology oversight that to make sure that we're capturing how many people have got technology within that. It's got a bit of context in terms of setting scenes, in terms of projections and what household makeup, etc. So for me as a commissioner, that is really vitally important. And I know I've been at previous committee meetings where we've described how important that performance and data is to inform the work that we're doing and to inform the right resources to the right place. So I just thought it's useful just to put that in context, because I think, certainly this last 6 months that's significantly moved, I think, colleagues, on that. We were going through them yesterday at our DMT, our Directorate Management team meetings, and we do the same for our service management team meetings, both adults and children as well, collectively. So again, that's an evolving piece of work. It's never going to stand still. So we know, for example, we've got additional ASCOF targets that are coming through this year. So for an example of that will be, so I think there's about 5 new indicators that we've got coming through. We think they're probably aligned to the CQC inspection. And interestingly, are focused on things like workforce and provider quality of market. So, but it's things that now we've got on our dashboard, so we'll be able to quickly look at those and to keep a close eye on that, on the changes if we need to, and to escalate that. So there's a really clear governance structure around the performance from Teams meetings, isn't it? Up through to our service management team meetings, up through DMT and to the exec review team if it needs escalation, and then obviously bringing back here. So today the focus of the report has been specifically around bringing things by exception, so things where we've identified there needs a bit of work on, rather than look at what we're doing well. So within the report, we've not really described things that we are performing well on. So previous report did that, and I think most of that is fortunate because the work is continuing. It's pretty static. So we're still one of the top performers, for example, around admitting people into long-term care. We don't, we're really good at that, at keeping people out. We're really good at keeping people within the community. So we haven't gone through the areas that we are performing really well on. We've decided that we're just going through to committee today an area of focus for those. So I'm going to just go through just to pick up a few points. As I said, we don't intend to take up all of the time, because we want time for us to talk and discuss and reflect on what, some of the questions and comments you may have. I'm going to hand over to Steve to look at just to talk through some of the operational demand that we're seeing coming through, then to David, and then through to Danessa for the children's side. So I'll quickly, if that's okay, Chair, take us through on that structure. Okay. So obviously within the report, you would have seen the Q3 finance report, so I don't intend to go through that. But the focus it's mainly been on the ASCOF areas of improvement. So these are the areas particularly that we've also picked up, and we'll talk about that within the second item around the CQC update. So I'm going to give you the update around that. So these areas are the other things that we've also signalled that we need to improve on.
Can you explain what ASCOF is? Because people...
Sorry, yes. God, and it's the Adult Social Care Outcomes Framework.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, absolutely right. So it's the way that we benchmark our activity across the local authorities. So we have a suite of indicators. There have been quite a few changes this year, quite a few taken out, and a few new indicators being put in place that we'll need to have a look at. And I have got them on an email if anybody wants to know what they are at the end of this, so I can go through those. So essentially, the areas of focus for us have been on the proportion of carers who receive directed support in Shropshire. So whilst we've seen a significant improvement, as I've stated in the report, from 2019 to 2022, we have had a slight decrease last year. We've also within that as well. So within carers receiving that direct, and you've got the numbers there. So when we've compared to our nearest statistical neighbour, well, it's a hard word to get out, we have just other areas. It's really difficult to compare and contrast, because we have a high number of carers that we support. So I know we've talked about this previously within the carer strategy before it went to Cabinet for approval. For the carer strategy, we've got an in-house service provision. Other areas don't, so there will be less carers being supported potentially, depending on how they source it and how they commission and deliver that support for carers. So it's not a direct comparison. It's really difficult to do some of that work. Just useful just to point out, for our carers support service now, it is now an all-age service. So that has gone live from the beginning of April this year. So we'll have continuity in terms of approach and support service throughout as an all-age approach, from our young carers right the way through. So we think that's the right approach. And again, I think we've talked about that previously at the previous committees as an approach. So we're working with a lot on the carers action plan now. So from when the carers strategy was signed off last year, I think it was, at Cabinet, we've got an improvement action plan around supporting carers that we're working through at pace at the moment. And we're also looking at having the carer support service being a bit more of a kind of a one-stop shop service. So care assessments will be done within the team. So that's what we're working with operations on at the moment to get that and to trial that to see how that works. So you're not repeating your story. You're going, if you want that service, you build that relationship with the carer support team, and then some people decide they don't want a care assessment, but may want to at a later stage. But at least whatever support service they're receiving, they're in that support service and will be able to access that at any point and have a review at any point as well. So we're working really closely with operation colleagues on that. The other bits to point out is that we are going to explore maybe a digital care assessment offer as well. That is something that other local authorities are doing. It suits some people, particularly the younger cohort. So, for example, we've got a contract called Mobilise, and in fact, Shropshire built that support digital platform very closely with Mobilise. So we're working with them to look at whether we can offer an alternative solution or an alternative choice in terms of an approach as well, because we know that's what we want to be able to do is to have multiple ways of assessments. The other area that I just wanted to point out, a few areas that I want to point out here, is the learning disability and paid employment. Now, it's on there as an area because we haven't met the target that we collectively locally set ourselves. So this is not an ASCOF target as such. Whilst it's reported as an ASCOF measure, the target itself was done locally because our numbers are higher, as you can see within there. So you see on page 7, 8, you've got our previous results. So we were at 7.1. We're at 7.2. We've just dipped down slightly less because of the way we're recording it and reporting at the moment. It's more of an annual approach on it. But compared to us, oh God, that word is not going to say it. My most comparable neighbours, should we say? We really are. We do benchmark again in the top quartile. So when it comes up, because that particular statistic and that target and that measure is reported as part of our Shropshire plan suite of indicators. So when sometimes it comes up as an amber because we're not quite hitting, it's just slight, and one person may impact on that because there's such low numbers, as you can imagine. That we're working really closely with our team, our Enable team. And then, as I said, the service is working with clients to find opportunities to develop skills and positive experiences through training, volunteering, and to find suitable employment. So they have had significant success reported in the report that you've got in front of you, with 41 people with a learning disability engaging in internships across Shropshire in a variety of work placements. So there is a significant amount of work going on behind the scenes, but sometimes it's coming up that it's slightly less, but it's only because actually we're pushing ourselves to do better locally, because we think we should and we believe we should. The measure there around the proportion of adults learning with a learning disability who live on their own or with their families. That's another area that we're focusing on. You would have seen as part of the transformation programme, and we've reported here before, a particular focus around finance. We know we're an outlier in terms of those 18 to 65 supported within their own communities. And whilst we benchmark really high, again, in top quartile for supporting people in the community, which is what we want to do, we don't want to change that approach. However, it has to be in the most cost-effective and efficient way. So therefore, we're looking at the supported living model as part of transformation work. It will be part of savings, part of the MTFS that you would have seen. Thinking about how we bring in technology, etc., to support those individuals, how we look at nighttime support, how we work with planning colleagues to look at, self-contained units grouped into one place rather than what we've got, a lot of individual buildings and dwellings across Shropshire, which is not always the most cost-effective way. So we're looking at all of that at the moment, and that's a big part of this year's transformation programme that the team, again, are working, both with children and adults on as part of the transitions as well. I just think it's the other thing that I think we just want to point out is around the proportion of people who say that they feel safe. That has significantly improved, as you can see within the table there. but we're wanting to do more. And again, one of the things that we'll talk about within that, I don't think that we have put in here, that we have described, is around people accessing and finding ease of finding information, advice and support. That's again, and we'll pick a part of that up as part of the CQC information return on the second item.
Was that dip in 21-22 COVID?
We think so. We
Yeah.
believe so. Yeah. And interestingly, as well, you can see the dip. When the last report. So every year we do the performance team work with us and we present it to our SMT meetings, and it's a comparison then against the trends nationally. We are pretty much, whether we're above or below, we're tracking exactly the same, and we saw the exact same. I don't think it's really clear on that graph, but it is in others. So, when we're not an outlier from that perspective. But for Shropshire, when the performance was always very good, when we dip, it raises eyebrows and concerns. And so that's what we then start looking, trying to look into that a bit more. But that was yes, Chair, that was our understanding of that. I thought it would be useful. I know what isn't an ASCOF data. I think it's useful just to put on the radar dementia. So we've discussed it again. I know we discussed it previously within the market position statement because it's come up as an area of focus for me as commissioning, and for us to work closely with operational colleagues around that, and not just operational colleagues, wider colleagues actually around what we do around that. So as you can see there, so that is what we're looking at in terms of the prevalence and the projections increasing up to 2040. So this is based upon some of the national data based on prevalence and aging demographics. So that's what we are predicting moving forward. We know, for example, we've talked again about it within South. We know we've got a higher aging proportion in the south of the county, particularly with those aged 85 plus. So what we'll need to do is, again, it's making sure that whatever we were seeing as part of the performance and information, that we're triangulating that from a commissioning perspective, from a resource perspective. And so operations are then amending and changing and reflecting that, feeding that through from commissioning perspective again. And it will be saying not just, it was saying for children's as well, that we're reflecting that within the resources, the contractual arrangements that we're doing and the target setting that we're trying to do. And also working how we work really with our community, our communities and our health colleagues. So I just think it's something that we just really need to keep an eye on and do a bit more of, because I think and what we're seeing coming through is very complex individuals, as as we know, particularly from hospital discharges. So, and a high proportion of those needing more one-to-one support as they're coming out of hospital. So how do we collectively look at support for people with dementia within their own communities? So how do we do that, and that that is a collective responsibility and a challenge and something that we need to do together. So
I do have concerns about going forward, because I was part of the year from the end of the war, and there was an awful lot of us born in 46, 47, and that we're just going to hit the list in the next couple of years, and really have concern how we cope with it going forward. Some of you aren't so to me, some of you are nearly. But it's a big concern of mine as we go on, what the cost is going to be to us.
And that's what we need to do things differently, isn't it?
Yes.
Also, which I don't think is in here, is the predicting the numbers of people under 70 who are getting dementia. I mean, my understanding is that it's becoming quite prevalent. But what are we doing in Shropshire regarding that? And are we taking that on?
It's a really great question, Councillor. So what we're seeing is an increasing number. It's not huge numbers, but we are seeing increased numbers, and particularly those with learning disability, because as they're, as health is improving, we're seeing, somebody with a learning disability who would, living much longer and healthier, which is great. But what we are seeing is that there is a higher prevalence within that. I think, Councillor, it's an area we need to do more of, and we need to look at more. I think there's a lot we can do and should be doing. So one of the things that I think we need to do is to look at other areas. So when we're looking at benchmarking, we're looking at some good areas of practice across other local authorities that are seeing high prevalence of dementia as well. There's real opportunity here to link into the work that we're doing with our colleagues with public health and our health colleagues around and our voluntary community sector around the neighbourhood plans and the neighbourhood planning and the hubs that we're setting up. I think we could do more and upskilling people to understand there are simple things that people can do to support people with dementia. And I've heard some fantastic case studies in other areas where you've got people being supported in a farming community, and people with dementia we know like to wander, but they'd have a WhatsApp within the village. So yeah, just saw Jeff going down the street. Yeah, okay, I've just turned him around. Somebody on WhatsApp, just turned him around, and the community support that individual to remain in that, in his own home and environment. But something as simple as, and it's just about how do we galvanise and educate people to inform them that it's not, you can live a healthy, good life still with dementia. It's not, actually, well, that's it, you're going into a care home. That's not what we want. So, and that's what anybody wants, is it? So it's thinking creatively about how we do that and we manage and support that. And that is definitely a collective issue and a collective response that we need to do more of and focus more of, I think.
So is there something regarding that us as a committee could get involved in?
I would very much welcome that. Yeah, very much welcome that. I think there's a lot to do, I think, around that.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand over to Caesar just to talk you through some of the social care demand. Hand over.
Yeah. Thanks.
I've got one other question as well.
Oh, sorry.
I also wanted to ask you about visual impairment, because I couldn't see anything about visual impairment on the graphs, and that is sort of quite a specific area. And I was just wondering how Shropshire's managing that area at the moment. And
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a sensory impairment team that we complete specialized assessment.
Can I just ask that they use their microphones?
sorry,
It is on.
It is on, so it's not picking him up, is it?
Is it picking me up now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for that. So Shropshire has a specific sensory impairment team, and we conduct specialized assessments. We are looking within our transformation program where that is best suited to sit, because we like to think that we would like it at the front door to pick up those particular people at that particular stage to ensure that they have the right support at the right time. So Shropshire as a whole has a bespoke team that does that together with other services, and we consider those sensory needs as quickly as possible, because when we conduct that holistic assessment, we need those needs to be at the forefront of what we do.
okay, so is there much of a waiting list to get that assessment at the moment?
There is.
There is a waiting list. We're not certain how big that is, but we can bring that back to you with further information
right,
if that
thank
is
you.
required.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add a quick one on that?
Yes,
Do you
please.
deal with the blind school at Hereford? Because my daughter works there, and I wondered if this council is like the rest of the country that send their young people to Hereford.
I don't know how to answer that particular question, but I'll go back and ask the team, and we will be able to answer that
Because
specifically
the
outside the
school,
school.
I've been to some of the things that
We'll ask that.
even though my daughter works there, but there we are. It's somewhere where they play blind football, and they're in at the top teams and everything. But they have these special days that people can go and look, and it would be very interesting actually for some of the people on this committee to go and see that.
So if I
Ruth, did I see you with your hand up?
yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, David.
To respond in terms of the children's perspective, Chair.
So quick, because we're doing that.
So very briefly, we may well place some people in that type of provision. We will also place them elsewhere as well, depending on where they live and where they're located, whether they're looked after or not looked after, and all sorts of different features and types. What we absolutely do, as Caesar described there, we also have a sensory inclusion service as well that supports children and people at school age that are from mild to more severe need. So I think what you're describing, Councillor, is probably the more severe side of the the need profile, whereas generally what we would encourage is more mainstream and more ability to interact in all school settings.
Well, there's the mobility there. They teach them to go from A to B and B to back to A. And my daughter is one of those that teach them that.
Yes.
But the thing with it is it's the councils that have to pay for it. And I wonder if that's what we do as this council, will be paid for something like that.
If I may, yes, in those particular circumstances when that support is required, as part of the assessment, the council will look at funding specific needs in specific settings. Again, that is a needs based on needs rather than wants, and we need to be very specific of that. And if our assessment identifies that particular school, let's say, because we have to search to provide the market to ensure we achieve best value. If our search identifies that particular school, councillor, we will consider that and we will fund that if that is the best place to meet those needs.
It's just worth it.
Well, that's my other questions.
It's worth pointing out the sensory team do that work as well.
Yes,
so
they got a job here.
Yes, yeah, they will
But she
do
went
that.
back because she loved at school.
They do really.
Can I bring something now?
Thank you, Chair. Are we doing questions after each section or?
We were going to, but if you've got one, you're okay to wait.
Before we go on
Okay.
to.
Carry on, please.
So the vision impairment bit, are there timescales, or do you measure the timescales between issuing a certificate of visual impairment and assessment by the sensory impairment team? But I think that's the bit that would interest in me and this committee really. And I've already said I'm no longer trustee of a sight loss charity. Ask that question generally, because it's that time, I think, from going to the hospital, being told you're losing your sight, getting your certificate, and then the wait, and how long is that wait before you get the support of the assessment at home and all the tech and the equipment to help you. And I think that's an all age question. That's possible. And then on the lots of questions or lots of points around carers. But one of the things you mentioned around, you measure the number of people with a learning disability living at home or in their own home. When they live with families, do all those families have a carers assessment? And do you do dip audits as you're doing in children's to see if that's up to date?
I'm happy to pick up that question from an operational point of view. So all people that are identified as carers are offered a carers assessment by our teams, and depending on their answer and their wishes, they either complete that in a hub or with that social worker in their home. Alternatively, if they do not wish to have an assessment at that moment in time, we refer them to our partner agency, our commission provider, and they, as Laura mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, they will be put on and they receive support via that service, but at any time they can change their mind with regards to a carer's assessment. So from that perspective, yes, I'm certain that those services are offered. And also our services, our front door is geared up to identify carers as well as take referrals directly from members of the public that want the carers assessment through our front door and the information that is available online.
On the ASCOP measure, and I note that you're getting some clarification with West Midlands ADAS, but do you measure people carers who receive support or carers who are offered an assessment and refuse support, or both?
Happy to pick up that answer as well. So as ASCOF as Laura indicated, is a national figure. So those are national figures that all local authorities need to abide by. Those are particular figures identified, and we're more than happy to provide that data of what is required. Locally, we have different targets and we measure different things. So from a local perspective, I'm sure that we would have that data available that is requested, and we can run reports on that data quite straightforward. But on ASCOF in particular, I do not think that that is a measure that ASCOF looks at.
People, carers have to receive the support to be counted in that. So you could offer everybody an assessment, and if they all say no, you're on a zero.
So
correct.
We identify carers in Shropshire. We have people that are identified as carers that haven't received an assessment. So the fact that we identify them, and I believe that is your question, we identify people that are carers. So it's not dependent if they receive an assessment or not, because people can change their mind. But with regards to accessing a carer's assessment, in line with the Care Act, in line with the current legislation, any individual, any resident of Shropshire can ask for an assessment to take place.
And that leads me on to my last question, if I may, Chair. So when we look at the people with dementia and Laura's example of, people in rural communities are usually fairly well supported by the community because they're known. I mean, I could think of at least half a dozen people with dementia who I know their spouse, that they don't see themselves as a carer, so they come nowhere near social services at all. And yet they're caring 24/7. And I just wonder how we unpick that and offer that support through informal community groups rather than through a formal social care route.
Just if I can pick that, I think that's a really good question, Councillor, and I think we've talked about this before, haven't we? And I think that's, I think you described earlier, Councillor, what can we do as community to support that? I think that is something that, we can do collectively, because we can maybe do some targeted, I know we have like dementia awareness weeks, but there's more, I think we could do more around that. And I think that's where the committee and others can support the carers team to do that. So they're out and about doing a lot of that. So we're one of the actions previously was around collating groups around what's going on in local areas and picking up on like directory of services stuff. So that's work is ongoing. So I suppose my reflection is I think we could do that collectively, and it can't be done in isolation. But people don't see themselves as carers. You're absolutely right, and we want to be able to do more, to reach out to more. So that's part of the carers team's actions about how they're going to try and do that. They're going out, meeting more people out in the communities, out in the rural areas. Even like the local hairdressers. The discussions that we were talking about, around the kind of that community navigator role. Well, actually, you're a carer. Did you know you're entitled to? And so we've been talking about how we can do that a lot more. And you as integral to your own community is how we can have a separate discussion about how we do that, because I think it's really important that people do get the support that they need and the advice and information that they do need.
And if I may, to follow up from Laura's comment, I don't think that I've touched upon a question that you had earlier. We also, within the service, we conduct regular audits on our carers assessment. So within quality and quantity around what we provide. So that's number one. And in addition to what Laura said, as part of the transformation work, we're looking at front door currently. And that's a council-wide project to understand how we share information both on digital means and non-digital means. And at the same time, we are retendering one of our contracts to support communities at the moment, where we offer communities the support that they require and consideration for how people access services, adult social care or otherwise, are within that part. As Laura said, we are very keen to maintain our residents in the communities they live in, and they've been part of for many years, to receive the actual support in the community until the time comes when they need to move to a different environment.
Caroline, can I see your hand?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to know how carers are identified, because my own experience of being a carer for my mum, she was discharged from a hospital out of area in early November without a care plan, with an hour's notice, and came to live with me. And so I've been looking after her ever since then. It wasn't until January when a colleague actually on Shropshire Council, who had elderly parents who needed care herself, said, oh, get in touch with first point of contact and whatever. So I'd had that sort of 8-week period of hoping I was doing the right thing, but not knowing if I was. I didn't have any equipment, and so on and so forth. So how do you identify a carer? Is this something that comes through a GP, or, because I'm just worried that there will be other people who are less able than I am to sort of sort things out, who are falling through the gaps.
Thank you very much for that question, Councillor. And you just described a typical situation that people are confronted with every day along this country, because as we said earlier, people don't identify them as carers. They think they're good family members and it's part of their role. We don't have set criteria. So if we identify a person that is struggling to look after the loved one, we're having those conversations, and literally our professional, our social workers, our front door, having those conversations and make people think. And this is why we want to enhance our digital offer and information to spread the word of the good work that carers do and the support they're offering their loved ones. So to answer your specific question, we do not have set criteria that you have to meet. We have a conversation such as this, and then we explore what type of support that individual provides their family. And then we see what within assessing that individual's needs, that cared for's needs, what we can support, as well as we make that assessment and referrals to other services that can support that care for their particular needs once.
But how do you find them in the first place? Because there must be an awful lot of people out there who are struggling, who don't have, they don't necessarily know that they should be contacting social services. And it's only when they reach crisis point and perhaps ask for help from the GP for their own well-being that things are flagged up. So is there not some process by which a GP, once somebody is registered there, for instance, receives that sort of information?
That information is readily available to all our partners. So GPs, hospitals, district nursing teams, all clinicians in the communities are geared up and are aware of the services the local authority provide, as well as voluntary care services within the community that can help, and usually have those conversations with individuals saying, you're providing a lot of care, have you considered the carers assessment? And then those particular residents choose or don't choose to engage with us for further contact and support.
Thank you.
Angela, do you
just come back on that as well, just on the point. I think there's multiple ways that obviously we contact through, carers, and obviously that once they're coming through to service, individuals who need support, they will, have those conversations with the carer of that individual. So that's one of the ways that we do identify. I think the team are going out. Again, as I said, doing a lot of face-to-face, they're doing a lot of hubs, doing a lot of neighbourhoods, they're having conversations with GPs, as Cece is describing, and with our voluntary and community sector around identifying individuals, because our communities and voluntary, that people are attending groups, aren't they? So that's another way that they're doing that. We've obviously got, they're doing a lot of promotion around the Mobilise, which is the online, which is picking up a lot of the younger carers, and because people don't necessarily want to go to groups, so that's huge amount go through that service. I must get you the figures on that because it is quite stark. I think there's a lot of targeting of work that we do, but ultimately, if we don't know about them, we don't know about them, and that is why I think we do need to collectively work at and making sure the right information, advice, and support is really readily available and out there. So the teams are putting out things and all the times and promoting and doing case studies, etc. But that is about everybody talking to their neighbours, talking in the shops, talking to the local post office, the local landlady, landlord, at the pub. That is the only way I think that we're really able to really get that information back, because I know the question around dementia, just looking at the carers register, the highest reason that those on the register are carers is dementia. And there are also other sorts of reasons, but I think that's just, it is up to people to do that, and to have that conversation and to be open and honest about that. I think sometimes people don't want to talk about these things. They don't want to talk about the net. We were talking about, funny enough, at a session yesterday at the Housing and House workshop that we had. People are worried about having that discussion about asking for help, asking about the next steps of support, because it's difficult, isn't it? Especially if it's a family member. So, and that's why I said I think sometimes it's about a friend. Somebody might accept it from a friend rather than a family member to have that discussion. It's a community. It needs a community response, and that's and that we just need to be doing a bit more about that. Our carers register is increasing all the time since it's come in house, it is doing that. So I'm really pleased about that. But there are far more carers out there than we know about, and that's on the register. And we acknowledge that, and we're working, doing a lot of actions around increasing that even more.
Is it quick one? Well, I've got 2 or 3 actually. I'd like to just follow up what this lady's just said. It's not just coming out of ordinary hospitals, it's people coming out of private hospitals as well. I got a lady one night who rang me. This woman had rung her. She was on the floor in the house. What was going to happen? So I had to ring my local doctor. She had a different name when I rang up. I didn't realise she called herself something else completely. But I finally managed to get. So the doctor sent an ambulance round there. Now, I ring Tanya Miles if I get stuck on anything. And she gets really sick of me, I'm sure. But nursing homes, people coming out of the hospital and going into nursing homes they shouldn't be in. They're not the right nursing homes. You know, I mean, why do hospitals think, oh, we'll shove them in this nursing home around the corner because it's convenient? And then they find out these people are dying and they're in a terrible state and really they shouldn't be there. Then they say, can the neighbours not look after you? No, the neighbours are elderly themselves. They can't do it. So I'm sorry, I find that I have got an awful lot. I live in Ludlow. I've got an awful lot of elderly people who decide to have these operations and don't realise that when they get home, they've nobody to look at. They don't tell people. You know, it really is hard. Lucky for me, my surgery picked it up straight away. And we ended up with the ambulance going 3 times altogether. But to have a private operation and not know that you haven't got a bed at home and you sat in a chair, what is wrong with these people? You know, don't they realise?
Is this a question for this one?
Yes,
for health.
It really is very, very difficult. It is.
No,
health.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying
it's very difficult. These people like us who are counsellors not having enough information to give to the people that are asking, and that is what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm saying would it come under Jeff and health?
Yes,
as opposed to
definitely
these 2 here.
I would also like to talk about people that are disabled and have been disabled all their lives, and then people coming from this council and saying to them, we would like you to go into private accommodation. By this time, they are then looking after the mother's died, looking after the father who is elderly. How can she possibly leave where she's been living all her life? She needs to look after the father, and even though she's disabled, you know, it's very difficult. Then the money's cut. The money is cut back. So it's all things that happen to disabled people. I'm sorry. I know you've got to cut back on money, but to cut back money so the woman doesn't work anymore. She used to work. You know, it's all things that are hammering away at these people all the time. Disabled people and stuff. I run a disabled group, by the way, in Ludlow. People have never asked me that. I just get somebody from this council come up and say, are you still running that disabled group, Mrs. Parry? Yes, I'm still in it. They never get in contact with me about anything else.
I just want to pick up one particular thing. I can hear the frustration, and it's something that has happened nationally. One thing that I would like to challenge respectfully is adult social care act assessments are not means tested. The financial assessment comes after that point.
Yes.
I need to be very clear on that. So
sorry,
every individual is looked based on their needs.
Yeah.
Money does not come into this. Financial assessments are completed after the Care Act assessment is completed. So we, as social care, as adult social care, and I assume that's similar to my children colleagues, we will do assessments based on need and not means tested in any way, shape or form.
Down here is disabled people who have lived with their parents all their lives, and that the parents die. What happens to those disabled people when the parents die? Nobody else will take them on.
So that's why we usually like to have these assessments as quickly as possible, and to point out 32.9 or 33% of the households in Shropshire have one member of that family has a disability, and that's recognized through our data. What we want to do is have those assessments and those conversations early on to plan, So what I would hope is that family contact us as early as possible for us to conduct our assessments, for us to support that family as long as possible within the community. However, if in a crisis point somebody comes to us, in that particular instance that you've mentioned, my teams, all our teams within adult social care will try to minimize the disruption to that individual and make sure we're complying with the law, mental capacity, and we provide the right care at the right time.
I must tell you, I did have one man who started again because nobody was looking after him. You know, it's not good. Things don't always work right. You're trying to help people and people don't tell you things. So this man didn't say anything. He had a heart attack because he was starving. Over to you. Carry on.
Thank you very much. I'm unsure if I need to introduce myself. So my name is Cesar Sarbo. I'm one of the service managers within adult social care, and I'm deputizing for Natalie McFall, the assistant director for operations. I've been asked to look and present some of the demand that adult social care has been looking at during this past couple of months, and we're reporting as an exception. So I'd like to start off to describe that we've mentioned a waiting list within this report, and I don't want you to think that this is we're only reporting on 2. I'm happy to say all our financial assessment teams, mental health teams, safeguarding teams do not operate a waiting list whatsoever, and these 2 areas that we put on the report are reported by exceptions, as Laura mentioned at the beginning of the report, and they will also be covered within our self-assessment, where you will see that we have robust action plans in place looking to address some of these issues. That work has already started, but because this meeting has been delayed slightly, the data refers to, I think, October, December 2023, so apologies for that. I can provide an updated figures upon your request or next time without difficulties. So 2 of the areas that we put on the report is the deprivation of liberty safeguards, as well as the community team. And you can see some information around that, around the Shropshire context and where we fall nationally. I want to identify those as 2014 report in the House of Lords has identified deprivation of liberty as a mechanism as not fit for purpose. All local authorities in the nation have issues with the deprivation of liberty. As a whole, professionally, we were hoping that liberty protection safeguards, something that was identified and was in the news recently, would solve some of our issues. However, that has been postponed and will not be coming in. Hence, we're working with our colleagues within the West Midlands and in a best practice group to implement new processes for us to improve. As I mentioned, within Shropshire, we have a bespoke action plan to look at this. And since this report was written, I can confirm that we've made significant strides to addressing our waiting list for people. And I know this question will come up, and that's why I'm going to address it straight on. We have a process in place for people that are coming now. We prioritize on urgency. We work with partners to identify individuals, as well as we work closely with our hospital colleagues to ensure that we identify people as early as possible to make sure that we provide the support. We have a prioritization tool, and you will see on page at the bottom of page 12 that people are RAG rated, risk between red, amber, and green, and then we focus our resources to address that urgency as quickly as possible. With regards to our community teams, you will see that we have made some significant improvement on people waiting, and we're continuing that work as we speak. All our teams are looking at doing that work. The main question you will have is, what about the demand? The demand that we've seen through and the conversations that we've had is around Shropshire's demographics, and we've from what I understand, conversation in this forum has happened at length, as well as today's chair recognize the fact that people with dementia will start, people in reaching their 80s, which usually is when people would engage with adult social care and ask for more support. So as part of that work, I think I've mentioned it earlier, we're looking at transforming our front door, and we're recommissioning one of our major contracts to look at what support we can offer communities before they reach adult social care. Because one of the things that we've identified is we want people to engage with us as early as possible, because we have the ability to give them information and advice around, okay, they might not need adult social care, but they might need our information and advice to live a better life in their community, and then have the mechanism when the situation becomes appropriate for them to reach us and make contact with us to prevent similar cases that you've mentioned, Councillor. So as part of that, we've seen that increase in demand, and that's highlighted in the graph at the bottom of page 30. And you will see the difference between 2021, 2022 and 23, 24, as well as the timeliness that we've completed our assessments. Before I hand over to my colleague, to Davies and colleagues in Children, I want to make sure that I again stress that all our performance indicators and all our work has a robust performance management approach. We conduct qualitative and quantitative audits within the work that we do within adult social care, and we try to provide a consistency of service across Shropshire. Thank you.
Anybody got any more wrong? Okay, you can go first.
Councillor Jeff Anderson. It was a presentation, I thought, and clearly you're giving the overall impression that things are improving. I just wanted to ask, how have you achieved these improvements?
Is it in a particular area or
generally?
Generally, okay. So as part of the work that we've been doing, working with senior management team, Tanya, councillors such as yourself, first of all, we've used the refining of the data, the performance data, to understand where we need to focus on, what are we doing, and how can we improve. That's constant loop of improvement is always there. We look at our data and we establish what's going on. Also, within our qualitative audits, we see what is working. We have conversations with our staff, with managers, the people that do, and we understand what the issues are. We also have forums in which residents tell us and give us feedback to say, actually, we've learned from complaints and issues raised by yourselves within adult social care, and then we look at prioritizing and refining our prioritizing tools. In particular, for those, as part of this is an improvement for those, we've identified the resources that we had. We had conversations, demand. We looked where the demand was coming from, in particular with hospitals. And we've engaged in a work with our hospital colleagues to identify their difficulties and how they complete that. To be very specific, and I don't know if you want me to be very specific, for hospitals and deprivations of liberties, if anybody walks in to the emergency department now and they sit there for a longer period, nurses at this moment in time complete a request for deprivation of liberty safeguards. Within the new processes that we've developed together with our health colleagues, we're saying that referral will be made only when that person is admitted to the ward and after a particular moment in time, in line with legislation and capacity assessments that need to be done. So we're constantly looking at what we do, and we constantly talk with our partners to determine what needs to change within our processes. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Looking at the graphs on page 12, the upper graph, is that a statutory cut-off of 12 weeks, or is it one that this department has?
Thank you for the question. What we've done is the statutory cutoff is 21 days in line with legislation for deprivation of liberty safeguards. What we usually do is our figures are cut off at 12 weeks because we've used our current metrics. as part of the self-assessment and the CQC work that we're developing to refresh or fine-tune our dashboards, we are now reporting on the 21-day figure, but that is a development since we've produced this data and report, if that makes sense.
The back of that presumably would be a somewhat different graph that we see here, would it?
What I didn't necessarily want to do is, with the new metrics, complicate things, because I know we've reported this. What you will see in the graphs going forward, you will see the data outlined in a different way.
I was going to ask why the Shropshire data around the number of referrals and applications for dogs is higher, but I think you've answered that through the hospital, and I think that whole blanket approach sort of kind of sums up why people are waiting so long in A&E sometimes. Because it's not bespoke, is it? It should be, you know, you don't just, you turn up and you've had a fall and broken your leg, you don't necessarily need a dog's assessment. Okay, you've answered the question, but I just want to get that off my chest, actually.
I just want to come back again. That decision is based on clinical experience of the staff in hospitals. From my perspective, as a DOS practitioner and within social care, I would tend to agree with you, because you can use different pieces of legislation at the point. So I'm more than happy to show my knowledge of the law, but this is not the context of doing so. But I agree. However, I need to put the caveat: if that particular clinician in that particular setting has deemed that the capacity assessment needs to be completed in line with the hospital policies and procedure, they will need to follow that process. So it's a matter of the system not helping. And what we are systemically looking at our policies and processes and trying to change them as quickly as possible with our partners.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this morning I'm just going to step through a few of the aspects around demand for education, health and care plans. So that's the more higher needs and part of the support that a young person may experience or may require in an education setting from early years through to statutory school age and all the way up to them being 25 in line with the legislation. I'm going to take the report as read, but I'm happy to pick up any questions that you may have. In terms of just stepping through, I've almost outlined this in three sections, almost the demand. Why are we seeing this? What's leading to some of these demand changes? What actions are we actually taking to address and support and manage some of this demand? And then actually take you into some of the performance type conversations that we've been having. So if that's helpful, I'll begin. In terms of the why, what we can certainly see, and you've seen this on page 13 in the paper, is a real significant shift and increase in the request for assessment and therefore numbers of EHCPs that we have in Shropshire. It's quite an unusual pattern up to 2024 that is absolutely the opposite of what's happened nationally. And you'll be aware nationally there's been a consistent rise in demand from the implementation in 2014 of the updated legislation around special educational needs and disabilities. So to see that kind of peak and fall is very, very unusual. And I think that talks to almost a pent-up demand in the system within Shropshire that we've had to work through, and certainly does account for some of that increase in 2024 that we've seen there. When I talk to school leaders myself, that they also support that they have seen young people pre-COVID that they were allowed to work with. Then COVID hit and everything was different, and they've had to just re-pick up the baton almost really and work through with the new presentation of behaviour, presentation of need, etc. for that young person and other young people in their setting or school. So this has led to this real increase that we've seen, which has been really significant. So COVID absolutely has definitely had an impact. I think it's probably fair to say that since we've got into the work following the inspection in 2022, and just prior to that, we've reset the bar around educational and care needs assessment requests. Legally, there is a two-part legal test in terms of whether we may start an assessment, and that's whether the child may have a disability or may have SEND. Quite a wide-ranging, list of opportunities there. So I think part of the challenge is how do we define that? And I'll come on to that in a moment. But what we've done is we've enabled schools, rather than put lots and lots of blockers in the way, to have that initial conversation. And that certainly led to some schools reflecting on that, what that means for them, their setting, their provision, their young people, but also having those conversations. And that's been supported, particularly more recently since September last year, by the centre manager going out and visiting settings and having what we call planning meetings with those schools in terms of trying to organise when it may be appropriate, if it's appropriate, have that type of conversation and put an actual assessment in. So again, just looking at around managing demand. This is in also support of the work that our education psychology service do and other teams that I'll come on to in a moment as well, around when might it be appropriate? Is it appropriate to actually put that in? Actually, where might that line be drawn? A number of factors in terms of why we've seen demand increase. In terms of just a little bit of detail around where those increases have occurred, particularly in age range, I'm sure you'd be interested in this. We've seen the greatest increase in request for assessment in the early years, which may in many ways not be a surprise given that where we are in the calendar year 2023, 2024, actually, if you wind back to COVID, they were the young people that were most acutely affected by that situation, being in lockdown and actually having very little impact and influence socially at all in a number of cases. But we've seen a 72% increase in requests for assessment and overall ECP numbers. The two top primary needs are ASD, so that's autism spectrum disorder, and speech language communication. Again, may or may not be a surprise to colleagues in the room. We've seen the next increase in primary. Again, you can see a trend here, around 46% increase in numbers. And again, those two primary needs are consistent with ASD and SLTN, speech language communication need. It reduces somewhat in secondary, but it's still a significant increase. So we've seen an increase of around 20% in the secondary phase. Slight shift in primary need. Speech language communication remains, but we've also seen an increase in the presentation of SEMH, socio-emotional mental health need. And again, as you've heard, in countless national articles around the impacts of COVID, lockdowns, and general mental health support, that's in some ways not a surprise, but I think there is definitely a correlation between the speech and language and the ability of a young person, particularly as they move into secondary, to be able to express themselves and understand language, as well as the separate primary need areas. And then finally, we've seen an increase in post-16. So when we talk about post-16, we mean in this sense 16 to 25-year-olds. And there's been an increase of just shy of 10%, 9.9% there. So still significant. And those two primary needs are consistent with secondary, social emotional mental health and speech language communication need. So again, what you're seeing is a presentation of the need profiles, the increase in presentation that we're seeing. That's the demand, that's what it looks like. And the why, and it's a really interesting piece to just unpick a little bit. That has absolutely had, and this is outlined in the paper, a knock on in terms of the timeliness of the authority to be able to assess and complete and formalise and issue those plans. So you can see whilst demand has gone up, the timeliness has come down. We are working hard to rebalance that as we work our way through, and we have had investment into teams to look at the workload and caseloads of those officers, which remains significant there. So it is just a case of working through. The best way I describe this to school leaders often is, if you imagine a school of 100 children has been built for 100 children, the dining facilities have been built for 100 children, and you imagine 100 children going through a dining room, being fed, and all those kind of things, how busy it would be for 100 children. If you put 200 children or 300 children in that same dining room, it's going to feel different, isn't it? It's going to be busy. It's going to be, more difficult. That just puts a bit of a visualization to what we've seen here in terms of the numbers, because essentially they have increased double and then they've increased again. So you've had almost a threefold increase from where we were previously. So just to put a bit of context around that.
Sorry.
I'll hold that. Yeah,
It's Ruth had a hand up first, didn't you?
Sorry.
I'm just interested in the data behind the speech and language and what the waiting times are from referral to assault and then the service actually starting an intervention, because we've discussed this before here, people waiting considerable length of time for speech and language intervention.
Absolutely. So in terms of the waiting time, we report waiting times every meeting with the SEND and AP Partnership Board. So we can see that in terms of speech and language, we have almost 70% of young people that are seen within 18 weeks, and that's from referral into actually starting to access some treatment. Where we and the NHS providers assess a really quite acute clinical need, those young people are seen within 18 weeks. So there is a prioritisation and a rank rating that happens internally with the NHS provider Shropshire to do that. But for some young people, that there is still a waiting time that's beyond 18 weeks. And for some, if we look at the longest wait, so for some young people, that's 53 weeks. And the average is around 11 weeks. And that's based on data that was to at the Q3 of Christmas. Had you asked me that question a year ago, 18 months ago, we wouldn't have been able to provide that level of detail. And I think talking about performance, to be able to have that there and regularly report that, that's important. Why it's important? Because actually that's allowed us and the NHS to really support and challenge the work. And coming on to the actions to address that, the NHS have increased funding into the teams. They did that before the new financial year, but they've continued that on a recurrent basis. The challenge is recruiting colleagues into the service. So we've got a situation where the resource is there, the established posts are now there, but it's getting the people to come in and actually do the work, because it's just such a specialist area to bring them in. To combat that, we are part of the National SEND and AP Change Programme. We're one of a few areas across the country that are part of that. And thankfully, we've been able to engage in something called the LSEC programme, the Early Language for Every Child. Essentially, that's a way of managing demand, but actually beyond managing demand, it's about putting the right support at the earliest opportunity for young people. So you'll have heard me and others talk about Talk Boost and the ability to really support young people, provide intervention, analysis of their speech and language strengths, their challenges, and actually put some work in and around that. And that's part of that work. It's a different way of approaching the workforce challenge, where you may perhaps have a speech and language therapist who's supporting and supervising perhaps a high-level teaching assistant type of role. But again, those people can provide that intervention. So it's a way of trying to address the acute workforce challenges that we've got. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just looking at the backlog. Do you use, or would you accept statement in certifications from private companies to reduce the backlog at all?
So within the process, the process requires advice to be provided from statutory partners, that's education partners, health, social care, within 6 weeks. So generally, our timeliness of advice is really quite strong, and we've worked really hard across all of our services to accommodate that. And even within some of our health providers, where most of them are within 9% of their advice is within that 6 week timeline. We've just got a few challenges that we're working through with those colleagues, similarly around our EPs and our EP capacity, because every single child is a young person that requires that review, that consideration on a needs basis. So generally, we work with them in that way. We have ourselves engaged directly with external EPs, we call them locums and associates, in terms of supplementing that capacity to be able to do that. We do consider external reports, and I say consider because sometimes the quality is varied. And again, we have to just triangulate that with what we're seeing in the round, really. And that's the point of that education, health and care process. So it's not one individual making a decision. The way we've reintroduced the panels to, again, follow really clearly the expectations in law are a multi-agency education, health, social care partnership that review the case for that individual child, the advice that's come through, what that's telling us, the ability where we think of a mainstream school or others to meet the needs of that child and support them, and therefore what provision may or may not be required in the plan, and is a plan, an educational health and care plan, actually required, or do we think that actually that the needs of that child could and should be met within the mainstream school or early years setting or college. And again, that's linking to those Equality Act duties that all schools and settings have to abide by.
So it's considerable improvement on, say, 5 years ago, where the challenge of private and public was definitely there in terms of the backlogs.
Okay, and that's useful feedback for us. So I think that's helpful. I mean, what we've tried to shift to is a position where it's not almost a computer says no type of response, but we try and engage really carefully with schools. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of demand coming through in terms of young people, and these aren't numbers. These are children and young people. So every single child is different and is unique, and there is there's some information you can compare, but it requires that review. We've seen a really significant increase, particularly lately, of parental requests. So actually, we've seen some stabilisation of requests from settings, schools, colleges, etc. But we've got that continuation through from parents. So again, we're just considering with school settings and others how we might support parents in a different way. Obviously, working with Home Care Reform and Park and Sending Us, which is an independent advice as well. So we'll be trying our best to engage in that way. Thank you.
Hilary, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just about Talk Boost. It's been in place now for 12, maybe 18 months, something like that. So initially it was sent out with early years, and then out to schools with reception year 1.
All the way up to year 6.
All the way up to year 6. So how are you seeing a response to that? And I know that the settings are having to analyse and then give back their own data as to the improvement. How well is that being done from the settings, particularly the private settings, the nurseries, the early years? Because my understanding is that it's extra paperwork, it's extra time that they're having to do. So I'm just curious. I mean, I know the Talk Boost, and I use the Talk Boost, so I like it. But I'm just wondering how you're able to really analyse the data and the improvement of it, because I get a lot of mixed messages about Talk Boost.
No, thank you, Councillor. No, absolutely. So I think in response to the first part of the question, we are seeing an impact in terms of Talk Boost positively, in terms of, I think, as you described, the ability of settings themselves to understand what they may need to do specifically to support that child or young person's needs, and other really practical things that can help. I think because it's been supplemented by a free advice line that's been operated by the speech and language therapy team, so any school or setting or parent can call that helpline and get a direct conversation with a speech language therapist. That's been really quite helpful. We're continuing to push the data collection for the reasons you've just described, in terms of it is, I wouldn't say burdensome, but there is an additional piece of work to do around that for settings, and we're just exploring how we might try and reduce that if we can reduce that. I know Alison May and other colleagues are working really hard with the settings around that, but what we're seeing from that data alone is some really positive impact on those national indicators, and again that allows us to benchmark where we are. I would also reference, and you will have seen this in the education dashboards, the early years indicators. Actually, we're seeing some really good positive impact locally, but also with our comparative position nationally, and particularly on that communication and strand of the EOA profile. So again, we can collectively see that impact, and I wouldn't just put that down to Talk Boost. I would put that down to Talk Boost, the quality of provision across Shropshire, which is above national consistently in terms of Ofsted outcomes, the energy and outcomes and focus that yourself and other early years providers and schools are putting into this. There's an absolute focus in terms of this work. Our next natural question is, how do we move this into a secondary and FE space? Because I think where we're seeing the speech language communication and the social emotional mental health need, I really think, and I'm working to try and prove this, I think there's a real clear link with the social emotional mental health need around speech and language. And I think it's young people that are just becoming frustrated with their inability almost to express themselves or even understand information that's coming through.
No, just follow that up. Agree with a lot of what you're saying. I also think that something that is having a massive impact on speech and language and understanding is
Indeed.
the IT. And I wonder how our schools are managing the phones in the schools, because I think that is, I'm often shocked at how, babies of 8-9 months are learning to swipe and they know how to use the phone better than I do, you know. And so I do feel that this has a lot to do with it. You go into a restaurant and the children are looking. I mean, when we were kids, you had a colouring book to colour in, but now they're all sat round on their phones, and it's how we can tackle that. I did read an article about a school that has brought in with IT that absolute blanket ban on phones, which a lot of schools have, but the kids still sneakily use them, but they are put in a secure pocket, which is magnetically locked. And that apparently has massively improved the engagement. That's the word I was looking for. Of the children. And I was wondering if that is something that we could really push, because communication language is so important. It is so important.
And I would absolutely agree with what you described. And I think the challenge isn't just in our setting, schools and FE providers, it's home. And I think that shift of society, it is a really, really difficult one. And I think that's for us all and government to be aware of, because I think you're absolutely right. We've got generations of little children now that are so proficient on these devices that's their engagement, and it's that social interaction and communication. You know, we hear it, the Southern Trust done lots of research around it in terms of the amount of words that a young person at the age of 2, 3, you know, whatever age hears, that informs their language development. And actually, you know, if that's reduced, that will absolutely impact their ability to communicate, both receive language but also express language. And then engage collectively. So I think that's a real challenge. It's interesting if you compare that, and this is a whole different data piece, in terms of the overall profile of need changes in society nationally with that type of increase. And is there some correlation in terms of some of our social interaction needs and speech and language and those challenges we're seeing there? No, I think absolutely. So we will continue to, and I know schools absolutely are in terms of that focus, and many really support that work. And obviously with our HAF programme, we absolutely support that, and we get a really, really strong engagement and uptake of families using the holiday activities and food programme every single year. So we were delighted when it was extended this time. We just hope the future is as bright as it was this time, but you know, we've got our fingers crossed.
I'm just thinking, when you go on holiday, you see a whole family sitting there, not doing anything, just on, and it's just so sad. Vivian?
Maybe if the parents spoke to the children a little bit more, and they weren't so busy working to try and make money for the house. You know, I mean, the thing with it is, I'm the governor of my local school, and I went to a governor's day, and I was told that children sometimes, when they attend school for the first time, they have to be taught how to use the toilet. The food is all off the plate. They have no idea how to eat properly. You know, it's hard work for those teachers. We haven't enough teachers working in the schools anyway. Something that was on the wireless this morning, I wanted to ask, gender change, which has been a big thing on the television this morning. Do we have gender change? And we've got to have, haven't we? And mental health care for children, do the police get involved? Like, they don't get involved with grown-ups, do they now? They've been told not to deal with it. Do the police get involved if anything happens at school? Do they?
So there's a variety of answers to that question. So taking the first point in terms of transgender and gender identity work, there is obviously national guidance that's been shared, and it is guidance. There's consultation underway around that. I think it's probably best for colleagues to explore and have a look at that. It's actually probably as clear as it has ever been, and tries to address some of those challenges that schools have faced and are facing in terms of those conversations, when to speak to families about this, when not to, and how all of those things may or may not work. Because it is incredibly difficult for schools and governors and families themselves. We don't hold specific information around the numbers of young people in that type of category. Schools will absolutely have that information, and that will be part of their understanding around inclusion and the wider safeguarding work and all other types of support. Many schools that I go into are absolutely make a really positive expression in terms of awareness, that they're not trying to promote, they are just trying to have an awareness of the differences in society that we may see and may experience, which I think is a good thing, whilst also enabling young people to talk about it. Because I think the last thing we want to do is to push this below the surface. That's not helpful for anyone.
No.
So enabling an open dialogue around this with young people is really, really important, particularly when they get into secondary age. And
it's not very good for them as they get older and still nothing's been done.
No, and it's so I think talking about that, and I know lots of schools have positive either groups or engagement opportunities within their schools to do that. I mean, that may be a separate conversation we want to have outside of scrutiny. In terms of your questions around the involvement of police, it depends. It depends on the incident, depends on the type of situation. So responding to an incident in school, schools are able to call the police as anyone else can. And then the police, in conversation with the school, will take a view on the severity, just as anyone would in terms of the risk that's been posed. And again, if it was outside of school, I know there's been a recent change in the operational practice, but the police, there are still tier 4 and secure accommodation, you know, and suites that the police use to, you know, support young people and adults where they need to be supported in terms of their mental health well-being to safeguard them. So those things are in place. The operational limits are, you know, have changed to a degree, but absolutely those conversations are there. I mean, I don't know whether you want to add anything or Caesar in terms of that from an adult's perspective.
From an adult's perspective, from police attendants, we have the most appropriate agency that you've seen nationally. There's been advertising around different implementation of that. We're working with police colleagues at the strategic level as well as a local level to ensure that those mechanisms are fine-tuned, because we've seen nationally some instances where police has said it's not a police matter, but that wasn't necessarily the case. So within Shropshire, that is being looked at both strategic and localized level, and we're having conversations. Actually, within the out of hours process, I had to call the police and talk to the duty manager within the police and had conversation about most appropriate agency, because we needed to challenge the decision. So those discussions are happening on a regular basis. But as David has said, it depends on the certain circumstance. It depends on what type of support is required, because police incidents can widely vary, and it depends on the context. But I can assure you that those conversations are taking place around most appropriate agency and which side of the system, is it police, mental health colleagues, or adult social care, is the most appropriate avenue for us to consider.
Right, thank you.
That's Jeff.
Yeah. Oh,
And
sorry, the brain's going off.
I'm sorry, Jeff Anderson. This might be one for Tanya rather than, but generally speaking, across your various departments, things seem to be improving, certainly since COVID. But we've now got another factor in there, and that is the savings that we're forced to make now, which will inevitably cause a lot of restructuring of your departments. Are you, in your new restructured environment, still able to continue improvements that you're describing?
Take that if that's okay. So I would say absolutely yes. We have delivered as a directorate over £22 million in this last financial year. We described previously in this committee through a massive transformation programme across adult, children education. I firmly believe we've done that for the right reasons, delivering better outcomes from our residents, and the performance that you've seen today has evidenced that. This next year is a challenging year. We know that we've got to manage demand very differently across all three directorates, and our transformation plan for 24-25 is just about that. We've just completed our service delivery plan that looks at our priorities. We'll be aware of the VR programme across the organisation, but we know these are statutory services here that we are delivering, and for us to transform and do things differently and to save money, we're going to need to ensure that we've got the right competent staff to do that.
Okay, good.
Okay, Julian.
Sorry, yeah, I mean, I had some sort of global questions, but I'm conscious that we might not have heard from all officers yet, so I'm happy to save them. Are there still bits of report to
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yes.
Do you want to come to me now?
Best to last.
Yeah, well, for those who don't, if you don't know me, I'm not Sonia Miller. My name is Dennis Gray, and I'm a newly appointed Assistant Director for Services to Children. So I have responsibility for residential services within children's. I have responsibility for early health. I have responsibility for stepping stones and mine's gone now. So residential early health and fostering. That's the one. So I'm here to kind of just deliver the section around demand to children's, and I'm also going to take it that the report has been read. Just to note really that in terms of the chat that you've also received, what it provides is Shropshire's data, but the comparison with our statutory neighbours and the England average. So just please sort of review the data in that context. So in terms of reporting by exception from the report, I just wanted to spend a bit of time talking about early help, because in the last 12 months, you'll see that there's been a refocus on early help, actually transforming the service, and it actually aligns with what you were just, the question that you were just asking about demand and budgetary sort of financial implications of that, because the whole idea of the early help transformation started with us noticing within children's, particularly you'll know that our looked after children's numbers have escalated quite significantly. And when we were doing some audits of that, what we recognised was that there was a gap in a number of those children having had early help intervention. And so recognising that, we needed to do something about that. So the early help transformation is partly come about because of that. And the idea being that if we can intervene early with families, we can divert away from an escalation into children's social care. So the early up transformation started about 12 months ago, as you'll be aware. And what we've seen over those 12 months, this data is not actually in the pack, but it was presented to us at DMT yesterday. And over the last 4 quarters, we've seen a downward trajectory of from 11% to 2% of children stepping up from early help into children's social care. So that's quite a significant impact of the early help transformation. And it's actually what we want, because it reduces the numbers of children then requiring a more expensive service. In addition to that, we've also seen a significant increase in demand. We're seeing that on a month-on-month basis in terms of contacts into early help. And what we're wanting to do is to shift that balance of children being open to children's social care, where the majority of our children are sitting within our early help provision. And in the last month, positively, we've had 933 contacts, which is a quite significant increase into early help. If we look at the report, our early help assessments, in terms of the work that early help is doing, it's leading to more families being supported within the community. And that really aligns with the Shropshire plan in terms of our healthy families objective, our value. And because those interventions are more focused and specific, what we're finding is it's the right support to the family, it's at the right time, and therefore it then means that we don't get an escalation because we're supporting them at the right level. The other support mechanism to that is our early help and support team, who provides that sort of, they're sort of sitting on the cost of, does it need to come into children's social care and it's staying early help, and their input has been actually quite significant over the last 12 months as well, because the work that they have done has actually diverted a lot of families away from an escalation up into children's social care. So the early help transformation is about keeping that support within at the lowest level possible, supporting families when they ask for help. Our approach is the how can we help you model. So it's not about looking at a threshold. It's about what do you need? How can we help you? And it's focusing on that. If we move on to our referral rates, they remain lower than our statutory neighbours and the England average. And that's been consistent, along with our no further action rates as well. And that would suggest that we're working with the right children. And that aligns with the fact that our re-referral rates are low as well. And that would suggest that our interventions with families, it's the right support at the right time, it's what they need, and therefore they no longer need a service from children's services. So we're having the right outcomes. Our conversion rates of assessments, our conversion rates from referrals to assessments and child protection inquiries, they're also on par with our statistical neighbours and the England average. And positively, our assessment rate in terms of the timeliness of the completion of those assessments is consistently at 90%. So we're doing well in terms of doing the assessment at the right time, providing the intervention at the right time. And escalating if we need to, stepping down when we need to. Just some points of data. In terms of our starting and ceasing, our children in need numbers, we've had 641 start in the last 6 months, you'll see from the data, but we've also ceased 501. 641 started, sorry, and 501 have ceased in the same period. And in terms of the statutory neighbours and England average, we're on par with that. That number is below our statistical neighbours and the England average. And similarly, our CLAR numbers, we have 721 open at the moment. But in the last 6 months, we started 83 children, but we've actually ceased 71 children. So in terms of our progression of children through the service, our looked after children numbers, they are high, but we know that our comparators have similar looked after numbers. Their numbers are growing as well. And like them, we have plans in place to exit children out of the looked after children system. So not only do we have those that are exiting because of their age, they're turning 18, we have plans in place for children that are subject to orders, so stepping those down, stepping children out to special guardianship orders. We've got children waiting for adoption orders. So there's a range of and we've got children that are placed at home on orders that actually no longer need to be on an order. So we've got plans in place to step those out as well. And I think I can take questions.
Just remembered something that I need to say. Well done to the team that's brought our newest children's home in. Councillor Bardsley, Councillor Allcroft and myself went to the opening last week. I'm pleased to say it's come in, it's under budget. Well done. Questions, sorry. Is that one relevant? Julian?
And mine's a sort of global one. Is that okay at this stage?
Yeah.
But the whole, so I mean, there's two questions. The first one is a fairly straightforward, short one. I hope there's lots of data, lots of tables here. I'm just wondering if you are all comfortable with the relationship between those and the ones that actually appear on the dashboards that are open to the public, and that you know, in terms of the Shropshire Plan dashboards. You know, is there, if we got those dashboards right, in other words, in terms of, because obviously you can't put all of that stuff on there, but have we got that right? So that's the first question. The second one is really around the whole transformation programme. So we're pushing ahead in early early years help, and we're pushing ahead with family hubs, as I understand it. I have to apologise because I'm not a regular member of this committee, so I'm catching up here. But so I haven't got in my head yet a picture of what those hubs are all about and what they look like and what they might deliver. So I just think that all members probably need to have an angle on that. But my bigger concern, I suppose, is that this is the biggest area of pressure for the council. Are we missing a trick, or is there an opportunity, put it more positively, to be using capital to invest in some of this? I understand that in the end these are people to people services, and that in the end it's about revenue. But are we missing a trick? It just feels to me that, having looked at what other councils are potentially doing, investing millions in those hubs, in capital investment in making sure that we are doing the transformation. Are there opportunities that at a capital level to invest in some of this capital, in some of these services, in order to reduce the revenue pressures, but also in order to actually make those transformations which are improving the services in terms of family hubs and early help stuff?
If I could start that today. So absolutely, looking from a standard education perspective, we had, you'll be aware, nationally there was an announcement just before Easter around an additional capital grant that was provided to all local authorities. For Shropshire, the total for the last 2 years is around £4 million, which is super. We've got some that we've held on to just to wait and get our strategy aligned. So we've got a good pot ready to do exactly what you're describing with. So we went out to the sector just before Easter, and we've received 27 expressions of interest to set up what we call send hubs. So where we are looking at providing more specialist provision connected to a mainstream school. So those young people, and this is from early years, statutory school age into post-16, they may spend a proportion of their time in mainstream, they may spend most of their time in mainstream, there'd be a bit of a flow through. So the knock-on benefit with that would be reducing movement of young people and the time they are on transport from, say, Ludlow to Shrewsbury, or from, you could do the maths. Some of it, if you're looking at Ludlow up to Shrewsbury, is the equivalent of travelling between Leeds and Manchester, which you just wouldn't do, would you? It's bizarre. So we've got a real opportunity around that. And I know other colleagues are having exactly those conversations to align that. That's one part of the jigsaw puzzle in terms of trying to provide that place service in different areas across the county. But also from that, you've got knowledge and expertise that can then support other areas. So you're always developing a hub and spoke type of model. So you're never too far away. It is the vision from that expertise and knowledge and expertise, which I think other colleagues may want to elaborate on. But that's exactly what we're doing, and that ties back to the Send and AP strategy that we're developing. So yeah, hopefully a good example.
Yeah, absolutely. In addition, and I think that model of support, that hub and spoke, as a commissioner, I'm really, really supportive of, because I think it really works well at a place-based level. So the work that David will be doing, it's tied in with the family support. It's tied into the front door work that we're trying to do collectively, which I suspect will bring back for further discussion. So you'll have a visual understanding about what the offer is, and it will be different. And I think this conversation that we've been having is that it will be probably very different depending upon where you are in the county, depending upon the needs, and we're reflecting on that. So we're working closely with public health around that. And I know Susan mentioned earlier on around one of our largest preventative contracts that we've got as part of the Better Care Fund at the moment, and still will continue to do so. But we're looking at how we can collectively use that and model that, so it's in line with all of the work that we're trying to do. So it's not something in addition, it's something that absolutely will complement that front door and get people to access that and get the right information and advice at the right time, because that's really, really quite key. Just in addition to the capital question, it's a really interesting one, because we've had many conversations, as you can imagine, around that. A lot of investment has been gone on to children's residential homes. Adults have got our own nursing home, and we've talked about, do we want to go into that? And that's something that we will always consider and always be part of that. However, one of the things that we do want to do, so we talked about the supported living transformation programme earlier on. One of the things that we want to be able to do is to look at, and the conversations I'm having with the other ADs and the other directorates around planning and housing development, is do we want something a bit more bespoke for Shropshire that is, and I don't like calling it an extra care, but that's the only thing I can describe it as, but a self-contained unit then support service that would be across an all-age approach that is in one place, or we have multiple, that similar model across the county, because that's where our high cost placements are, supporting people to remain independent within their own communities. But we need to recognise that working across a very rural county is difficult for travelling, for providers to do that work. And that's why we believe, and this is what we need to unpick, but this is why we believe that our 18 to 65 cohort is expensive, because we've got self-contained units across the county that aren't working in a hub and spoke model. They're very much a 24-hour support within an individual context, which is an expensive model delivery. So we need to relook at that. So I think the capital investment conversation, along with our health colleagues around that kind of accommodation in housing support moving forward, is currently in discussion, and what they're just waiting for. What is it that you need? And let's look at it. And so that's what we're working through at the moment with operations, and also as part of the transitions cohort that will be coming through from children's into adults. What is it that we need, and what does that model look like moving forward? And then we're going to look at a drafting up, I suppose, a service spec to say to colleagues and the other directorates, say, this is now what we think we need. These are the numbers. This is the model and the approach that, we're working with our providers, we're working with family members, we're working with both operations across adults and children to do that. That's the next bit of part of the puzzle, I think, around that bit. I think the hub and spoke one is an interesting one. At the moment, what we're trying to do is utilise existing buildings. So we've got day services, for example, day service buildings that we've got in-house support services. We're working again across with colleagues and children's to look at a transition support, specifically on one of the sites that would, preparing children for adulthood. So giving them the right skills, cooking, all these skills that they need to develop in order for them to be able to, live independently moving forward. So we're looking at collectively what our assets are and how we best use them, as well as looking at potential new developments. I hope that answers your question.
Can I just come back? Thanks very much for that. I can't pretend to have completely got all of that, because it's a new field. Really, really interesting. So the two questions that occur to me is, one is, do you feel that move in that direction is getting sufficient support from finance, from the transformation program people? Are you feeling supported in those terms? And the second is that, to use the ABCD term, the asset-based community development idea, that are there partners around in the community who are part of that story and who will be part of those hubs, and presumably that's where we need to go. Is that parallel work with potential partners out there also happening?
I suppose the quick answer to both questions is yes and yeah. So yeah, and I think in fact, I would go as far as to say colleagues are going, Laura, where is it? Come on, we want it, because they recognise that's we need to do something differently. So yeah, so as I said, working at pace, get those numbers, because what I can just say, just build this for me, but I want it based upon the data and the information coming forward. I want to be able to put it on a robust return on investment business case, so we are absolutely sure it is the right approach, from a commissioning perspective. So that is why it's probably taken a bit longer than colleagues are wanting, but it's got to be right for Shropshire, and that's why we're working through that. And the performance dashboard information that we're collating and getting together now, we're in a better place than we probably were previously, I have to say. I think you've heard a few times, officers reflect on, didn't have 6 months ago, we didn't have that 8 months ago. We're getting there now, we're moving, as I said, we're moving at pace with that information. So that will really help inform that, some of these recommendations that we'll be bringing really forward for committee and for probably cabinet in the future.
Good. I'm glad to hear that you're working with parents who don't want really to lose their children, but circumstances make things happen. And it can be a relationship between the two people who are the parents. As an adopted parent myself, I have two girls who are now in their 40s, fantastic kids. You know, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. But I must say that when I think about it, maybe something could have been done for the mother who was on her own, instead of taking her 3 children away from her and them being adopted by different people. Luckily, the parents that were kept those 2 people together. You know, if that hadn't happened, they're still really good friends. They see one another nearly every week. You know, it's great. But I personally wonder how many children are each person that's working for you. How many children are they looking after every week? Or can't you answer that? It's about the people that are working for you. It's the officers that are working.
Social work.
Yeah, so you really trying to make it, because I know how hard that is as well.
It is challenging.
Yes.
At the moment. We do have capacity issues in terms of and caseload, but what we're trying to do is we've had the improvement, we've had some money from our improvement board, so we are securing additional staff, and we are looking at a retention payment as well to get permanent staff through the door. That's the priority really in terms of getting permanent workers through, because then we can exit our agency staff. But we do have agency staff that are supporting at the moment. And in terms of allocations, I can't tell you what the average is at the moment, but I can get you that information.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm the same councillor for Halskett. I feel like Vivian now because I'm going to fight the war for my own ward. Over the last 3 years, we've worked to build a community hub in Halskett at Halskett Grange. I'm actually a trustee of the hub. And we have had a visit regarding the use of that facility for a family hub. Now, Halskett Grange is probably one of the most deprived areas in Shropshire, and we desperately need that family hub. And, you know, please action that. 2 ladies came down, and I haven't heard much since. But, you know, it's crying out for it, because this is a very, very deprived area. We could solve a lot of problems within that facility, and this is exactly what the hub has been reopened for. It was derelict, it was flooded, it had been vandalised, and the local community has helped rebuild that facility, and it's been rebuilt for just this need. So please, we're breaking even, so any monies that could be sent our way would be most appreciated. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to say that I think the dashboard is a really huge step forward, and I know from the Children's Improvement Board that it's been an important tool in addressing some of the challenges there. So I'm really pleased to see that, and I'm also pleased to sort of hear about the numbers coming through to early help and where, and on one of the graphs where you've got people who are coming through to as a referral as early help, but they're also coming through as a referral, so you can really see where the work is focused. But are you able to capture on this dashboard re-referrals? You know, are people coming in, are they going through early help, case close, and then coming back? And I can't
Refer into early help.
No, when they come into early help, they leave early help, but then they come back either into early help as a contact or a referral. And I can't see them on the graph, but my eyes aren't brilliant, it's pretty small, and if I can get it off the screen.
That's not, from my understanding, that's not something that we are capturing at the moment, but we are developing the dashboard to be able to. Okay. So maybe next time when we come,
I mean, I think this is a huge step forward. I think it's great. Yeah. And then my second part of that question, and you partly picked on this in the answer to this, but around, is it having an impact on caseload, and or when do you expect that it might have an impact on caseload? And I know you haven't got a crystal ball.
No, there it is. I think it is having an impact for the fact that we are reducing the numbers of children that are stepping off into to social care. What we're contending with is what's there already. So it's about then moving those children through the system, getting those children out at the other end of the system, which we are progressing now. And it's a combination of both. It's about reducing what's coming in, but stripping out what needs to go, and that will then reduce the numbers, the allocations.
Thank you. I think it'd be interesting to see this through the board each time we meet, because if we see a downward trend, that's a really important part. Well, up on the red and down on the green on that chart. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on the first question I asked, so the dashboard that we see as members, the 31 indicators under healthy people. So it was just really a question as to whether you think those are appropriate at the moment, and whether they need tweaking as you're getting more information. So that, yeah.
We discussed this yesterday, didn't we, Connie? And it's an evolving piece, Julian, as you say. The dashboards are incredible. The access to information that we now have is so much more improved in the last 6 months to when we put on the performance indicators for all members. So we agreed yesterday, didn't we, that we would review what we currently got out for members and revise that. So by the July scrutiny panel, we would hope to have a revised and refreshed KPIs.
And I suppose the question is that for you as well. It's just making sure that you're happy with what will be as part of that. But because there are so many, it's huge. It really is. It's a huge amount, isn't it? Both children and adults dashboards are just so comprehensive. So big, but that's that. We will hopefully do that and align it to the transformation work and align it to our service plans as well. So then you can see the progress that we've got and the areas of challenge, I suppose, that you all need to be aware of and be open and transparent with you all.
And I think building on that, Laura, I think that's exactly the challenge. So our teams internally have that same. So again, you're seeing probably at the top there, there's some more there and there's some more there. So it's at what point do you draw the line? Otherwise, you could just try and look at everything and actually nothing becomes a focus. Yeah. So we've just got to try and balance that. So I think it's a really interesting one. We're having the same conversation with our schools as well. So for suspensions and exclusions, we want to share that information with all of them so they can see the comparators for each of their information, attendance. And again, it's part of that transparency and peer review, peer challenge, peer support, actually. Ultimately, we're all here to support children and people in Shropshire, aren't we? So, and adults. So it's making it a collective game, really.
Which leads me nicely on to, I noticed somewhere here, and I can't find it, the exclusions have gone up again. Had done.
Okay. So in terms of the dashboard, so the education dashboard, you've seen everything on there.
Yes.
Some really good things, some really challenging things. So exclusions are a challenge still. Secondary, particularly, primary are looking, pretty positive, to be honest. And you'll see that from the comparisons. I'm not going to tempt fate by giving an indication of where it is now.
No.
But so we're doing a lot of work, particularly since January, in terms of bringing secondary heads together, looking at how we work collectively, what we might do differently, and some of the aspects that I talked about around managing demand, or around those outreach programs. So we've had some new outreach providers that we're supporting schools to engage with before they need to get into that situation to change practice pedagogy. They started from January. We've had lots of schools, not all yet. I think that's important. So again, there's some taps on the shoulder that we'll be making in terms of encouraging schools to engage directly with those providers. And we've got other things such as we've called them ND practitioners, neurodiversity practitioners. They're working with almost half of our secondary schools and around a third of our primaries. And they're supporting that transition between young people, families and schools. So just to understand, before we get into the realms of ASD diagnosis and ADHD assessments, you're displaying these behaviours, you feel like this, what can we do to support you? That's the earliest type of support, which is really what we want to do. So that's a good example of the outreach, those spokes almost. And that already, it started in January, it's been led by one of our senior EPs, Kat Morgan. It's already having really, really positive comments from primary people in schools. So we will be bringing that back as part of our future work, actually, to share with you.
We need to keep these people. Okay.
Any more questions, anybody? Sorry. Are they staying for that? Okay, sorry. Was trying to get you going, but yeah. Right. Thank you. That's been really, really good. I don't know about everybody else, but I really enjoyed that. It's really a lot of explanation. Over to you, madam.
Just to summarise that section there, really comprehensive report, and thank you so much for your active engagement in there. I think we've picked up perhaps some key briefings that we may want to deliver to all members across the council. One is around early help. I think you've heard a great example today of the transformation around early help. I think all members would really benefit, I believe, in terms of hearing that in a bit more detail. The other one is around, I think, the transformation programme has been a fair bit, and I know some members want to hear much more about it. So I wonder if we should do a briefing session for all members in terms of the transformation programme across adults, children's and education. Clearly, demand is a huge issue for us in this council, like it is for all councils currently. We're doing a different piece of work around the front door in adults and children's around improving our advice and information. I think as members, we need to consider that in a bit more detail. Preparing for adulthood, we know that is an area of gap in terms of how we support our young people coming from children into adult services. And then likewise, in terms of learning disability support and that kind of remodelling transformation around how we support adults with learning disability to live their best lives at home in the community. We've touched on it a bit during the latter bit of the conversation, but we know that recruitment and retention is a massive issue in terms of social work in Shropshire as in the national picture. And I wonder again if members need to think about that as a future agenda item. We haven't touched on it in great detail here today, but I think multi-agency working in terms of how we work within the ICS and mental health provision, and then commissioning. So we're really fortunate now to be growing that commissioning capacity within Shropshire Council, headed up by Laura, all age commissioning. We have massive savings transformations aligned for this year. Again, the committee may want to consider what that commissioning might look like in terms of the future work programme. If members are okay, I know we're a bit short time. I wanted Laura just to touch on CQC. So you'll be aware that CQC contacted me a few weeks ago to notify me of an impending inspection. We submitted our self-assessment and I circulated that around to you all on the 15th of March. I wanted Laura just to step through where we are with it, so all members of this committee knew where we are in that kind of process. That's okay, Chair.
Yeah. Thanks, Tanya. So I won't take up too much time because I am aware of time has passed quickly. So just in terms of context, most of you will be aware that last April 2023, all local authorities will be subject to CQC assurance visits. Last year, predominantly it was around preparing. CQC were preparing for that, working and piloting some of the areas. So in November, around about 5 local authorities volunteered to do that. And then we subsequently received and saw the draft reports that those local authorities got. So from that point, the framework was then approved in December. And then from that, very quickly, local authorities started getting notifications of that said CQC assurance inspections. Shropshire, fortunately or not, as your case may be, it depends how you look at it, we got notification on the 19th of February, 3 weeks to then submit information back, as well as our SEF, which is our self-evaluation framework. So we submitted on the 8th of March a 154-page self-assessment framework document, which I believe you have seen, along with a summary version of that framework. We, in addition to that, submitted in a region about 230 documents. So it was a huge amount of work, and I just wanted to put on record a massive thank you to the teams and for everybody who supported in that area of work, because it did go like clockwork, considering it was our first time. So I have to say it was interesting and challenging, but we're just about recovering from it. So what we're doing now from that is using, so with the self-evaluation framework that you see, the SEF one that you've all seen, it's focused, isn't it, on your strengths underneath those 4 domains, and also the areas of improvement of activity that we've got. So from that, from the areas of improvement, we have extracted all of those elements into an overarching action and improvement plan that each area has got an officer who is accountable and responsible for its delivery and moving forward. That's not necessarily to say that once we get the call, because we are waiting for that call now, as we know. So once we've submitted that information, with what they have said is within 6, it could be within 6 months of them from the 19th of February, within 6 months that they will tell us of an impending on-site inspection. So we believe that probably will be a lot sooner than within 6 months. And to be honest, we're hoping it is, because we want to do it. We're waiting, we're preparing for it, we're waiting for it. So the improvement plan is managed on a weekly basis through our service management team meetings. So we go through those, and then it's then centrally, either if it's escalation, it goes through to DMT, or we've also got a monthly meeting with all individuals across the directorates that will support as part of the CQC inspection. And so we've got an improvement plan. In addition to that, we are also looking at doing a bit of a mock trial inspection early May rather. So we have been liaising with other local authorities that have gone through this inspection to learn from them. So, and again, you know, working with ADAS, sharing some good practice. So you may recall last March that we had an initial peer support review assurance visit. So we've all, you know, so that those actions have also been trained, and actually a lot of those have been complete, I would say. We probably need to go through those again. But so the framework at that time wasn't approved. So we are now working to the actual framework, the national framework, and we're working to our own SEF evaluation framework as well now. So it's very, very much more bespoke and much more tied down. So in May, we're looking at doing, a mock inspection along with around about 15 different mess sessions that we'll be working with our officers. We feel we need to do that because our officers are not used to inspection. It's not like Ofsted, you know, where for children's, they're very experienced with Ofsted, you know, officers would have been in front of inspectors, would have been interviewed. What CQC have been, and what we're learning from our colleagues in other areas, is that they don't want to talk to the managers. They want to talk to individuals who are on the front line, who are doing the work. So the information that we've sent to them, they're looking to triangulate that. What we said, what we evidenced, is supporting by what people are saying within those meetings. So it's just about trying to get them up to speed and understand the types of questions that they're likely to have, and so we can prepare them as you would for any interview that you're going into. And what we've been really clear about, and I'm hoping it was apparent within the self-evaluation form, is that we've backed it up with case studies and we've backed it up with evidence. So whatever we've said, we've backed it up with evidence. And that is something that we've talked to at previous meetings about, isn't it? You know, and around, that's a very changing culture for us to be able to do. But I think actually we've got a really strong, you know, self-assessment that we have put forward to the CQC. So at the moment, as I said, working through those specific actions, we're working with our stakeholders who are likely again to be called on. We know that they had, as part of the 230 documents that they requested underneath those domains, one of those is quite a robust, it's quite a wide range of contact lists of those individuals and groups that we work with on a daily basis. So they will also contact those individuals. So for our providers, with our social care providers, for example, they will send a survey out. So they will ask some questions in advance of that. We'll know that when they do send that out, because we are also a provider of services in-house as well. So when that goes out, we'll know what that looks like. So we'll be able to all get a good understanding of the questions being asked at that point. I don't think there's much more to say at the moment on that. Again, some of the areas that we've talked about today are part of that CQC improvement and that work that we're doing and that development progress. Have I missed anything else, Susan?
It's which is also CUC will make contact with some of the people we support. In other areas, we've received feedback that CQC will ask for a list of individuals they can make contact with. And that will be, again, part of the triangulation process, as well as with the survey that we produce and we need to produce. So it's both on the side of our partners, our providers, as well as the residents that we support within our community. And that is an ongoing work, because as you can imagine, people within our system move, and we don't have a static, and we want to provide contemporary evidence for the work that we've said, in line with the evidence that we present.
It's just also worth reflecting as well. So when they do come on site, what we will be able to do is we will be able to show improvement from the point of submitting the information that we've sent through to where we are now. And we can already do that. I mean, Caesar just described some of those areas. So some of the challenged areas that we know that we may have got. So we talked to some of the DOLS waiting lists and community waiting lists. We are seeing improvement, and that actually goes to Tanya on a weekly basis as part of the assurance that there are improvements being made. So I think it's really useful. I think it's important just to point that out. And what we also do know, unless it changes, and I think that's the key thing, is that things are changing. CQC are going out and they're learning, they're changing, and they're developing. We know from one of the local authorities that we did speak to is that there will be opportunity for Tanya and the senior leadership team and others perhaps to present actually at the beginning, to show, to just present and to give a bit of an overview in terms of where we are as an organisation. But apart from that, that will be our only really input, won't it, Tanya? And in terms of our, they won't want to speak to Davies and AD. You don't want to be speaking to Caesar, and we don't really want to be speaking to Tanya. Well, I think you might get an interview. She might be lucky when gets the interview, but they will be supporting to speak to our officers on the front line, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's pretty much where we are, Tanya. Anything to add? Yeah. That's Dave. But yeah, any questions, and then please come back to us. But we're now waiting for that call, so every Monday we're I just think bring it on now.
We want
bring
it.
it on. Yeah.
The worst part is that waiting, isn't it?
It is.
Like in school, people know where they're waiting for the Ofsted to come.
Yeah.
Tension racks up and racks up, especially the schools. Terrible.
We've hidden nothing. We've been very open and transparent. Everything that we put in there, we've been very there's as open as any stone that they can look under. We've been very open and transparent about where we are as an organisation. We've backed it up.
Bruce?
Yes, thank you. I mean, it must be 20 years since been an inspection like this about the social care. And I do think the self-assessment very thorough, and I think the case studies really illustrate the narrative that you can put in. And I just want to comment on page 151. I am really delighted that you're going to be using Bishop's Castle Hospital. And I can't let the occasion go without mentioning that. I'm very pleased, and the community will work hard with you on that as well.
Work programme. Or do you want to got anything else to say on this?
No, not on CQC. So I kind of have to step through some proposals for the committee to consider in terms of the work programme for the next 12 months. Let me step through that again, Chair. I'm happy to do that. So recruitment and retention and workforce strategy, I think, is an area that the committee may want to consider. Multi-agency working, that has been discussed at previous committees in terms of care and support around mental health for adults and children. The commissioning side of things. Learning disability and in terms of that whole transformation programme that we talked to. The whole demand piece around what we're going to do differently at the front door. We have talked previously around when we know we need to bring a child into care, what's the most effective and efficient way of looking after that child. And we know it's keeping that child in the family setting, either within our own family through a special guardianship order or through fostering. There's been a fair bit of work that's been done by this council in terms of recruitment of fostering and what we could do to support our foster carers differently. So again, committee may want to consider bringing that back into the work programme in terms of the development there. There's a massive transformation programme going to be happening in the People's Directorate. So I would suggest in the future programme in terms of what does our successful savings look like, maybe this time next year. We need to also consider the work of the AP and SEN programme. So you'll be aware of the accelerated action plan that we submitted to Ofsted. This committee will want to review how we're getting on with that. And then I think we'll need to consider some briefing sessions for all councillors in terms of the early help work, the transformation programme. Again, around demand, about dementia, not only dementia of the over 80s, but also working age dementia. So they would be kind of suggestions of the team we've kind of come up with that you may want to consider as a work programme.
I'd also just like to know a bit more about the visual impairment as well and what's really going on there, because that doesn't
included.
Will that be included in that? Yeah. Okay.
I think so. I've got that down on my list.
It doesn't seem to come up very often, the visual impairment, and I just would be interested to know because it's a different.
If we have the early help as a briefing, that can go out to all members, so that gives everybody else more of an understanding, and possibly the transformation as a briefing. So that, like Julian, you said you weren't up to speed, so if we do those. You know, all members then have got more of an idea of what's going on. So could we have that as a recommendation from today that we do that? Would you be happy with that? Okay, okay. That's okay, Mr. Dodd.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, just sort of add into that in terms of the work programming. So you've got a long list and there's some really solid topics in there, I think. And some way you can sort of go top to bottom and really explore the dimensions. A really interesting one that reaches across as well into health scrutiny and the learning disability accommodation and the links across into, I suppose, both what you heard about in terms of the learning disability measures and the performance report as well. So there's lots of great scope to sort of get into there. It's as you go through and do your work programme and do your work, it's just bearing in mind the 3 different main areas of focus for scrutiny. So holding to account, it's kind of what you've done today, particularly around the performance aspects and asking those questions, pre-decision and policy review and development. And again, those become part of the feature of the work and what the reason why you're undertaking them. Keep your work programme manageable, both in terms of what you can look at and so that you can add value in looking at it, but also in terms of demand on the officers and where they're going with this and the wider work as well. And again, as you explore the topics, make sure you're looking for those evidence-based recommendations as a result of doing it. And you've got 4 planned committee meetings a year. If you need to ask for additional ones, you can ask for additional ones through the chair and in conversation with Tanya as the director who supports the committee as well.
And yeah, the dementia one, I really feel that we perhaps need to join with health with that one because it's going to be such a big expense going forward. Yeah. So were you putting your hand up then, no? No. Oh, sorry. Okay. So everybody happy? Or feel you've got everything out for today you want? Right. Thank you ever so much, guys. Sorry. Oh, date of next meeting is Wednesday, the 10th of July. But could I ask members just to stay on, please, when the meeting is closed? Okay? But yeah, ever so much. It's really appreciate all your work all today.
For July.
We're all sit down.